Right, good afternoon. All of those who have joined us on behalf of SAIA Practice, welcome to all SAIA members, friends of SAIA, and those who may have joined us for the first time this afternoon. My name is Eugene Barnard. I will, as usual, be your host. Thank you for joining us. Corina Gibson from ECPD is here again to make sure that everything runs smoothly. Welcome, Corina. We have two very interesting presentations for you this afternoon. We do hope that you will enjoy the event with us. Please participate by posting questions or comments in the questions box. In session 2 later on, Jacobus Oys and Jessica Rogers will be sharing a presentation with us on lessons from the depth of the copy, designing an off-grid luxury lodge. But first, for session 1, allow me to introduce to you Dr. Jennifer Mirembe and Martha Chadiwa. Dr. Jennifer Mirembe is the lead for the education portfolio of the Urban Design Institute of South Africa. She is one of the directors in the National Department of Human Settlements Planning Unit. Jennifer graduated with an award for the best thesis in her master's in city planning and urban design from the University of Cape Town. She has international training on the impact of technology in human settlements in Germany. Jennifer is joined by Martha Chadiwa. Martha is registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Environmental Health and an MBA in Environmental and Energy Management. Martha is currently finalizing her PhD in Public Health at the University of the Witwatersrand and is focusing on occupational safety. She was involved in the creation and content development on the online Master of Public Health at the University of Johannesburg. Her niche area of research in public health is occupational and environmental health. She has interest in research that is focusing on how artificial intelligence, that buzzword, is impacting public health. The presentation deals with urban health, environmental health, and public health. Ladies, thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Eugene, for the welcome. Thank you for welcoming us, and good afternoon to all our online audience. It's such an honor for us to come together to share our experiences. Martha and I are passionate about the area of urban health. So just to give you context, after 15 years of working in the public service, and after about 4 years in private sector, I realized that we are faced with a paradox, right? And this is the paradox. The paradox is that as architecture professionals or professionals in the built environment, we are advancing in our careers. We have more professionals coming out into the market. Some of the more experienced architects are growing in their skills, in their scope of projects, and so on, and expertise. Now, in the medical sector or public health sector, it's the same thing. We've got professionals growing in terms of speciality. We've got a lot of technologies, medicines coming in. But colleagues, the paradox is that in our cities, it's not getting better in terms of health. If we look at what just the pandemic did to our society, especially people living in cities, it didn't look good at all. If we look at the statistics in terms of the National Health Institute, if we look at the statistics in terms of the Department of Health, it's not looking good. It is in our cities that many of our diseases are still incubating. Therefore, today, accompanied by my colleague, Martha, a specialist in public health and environmental health, we decided to come back to you, colleagues in the architecture fraternity, and just share knowledge. So today we're going to share knowledge on environmental health, public health, but why it is important for you and I to really take this overlap between environmental health, public health, and architecture seriously, because unless we do that, the health of our communities is not going to get better. And guess what? It is you and I who are the designers of the cities, the buildings, who must take responsibility. This is our social responsibility. So without any other minutes, I'd like to hand over to Martha, who's going to take us through the theoretical parts of it. And she's going to tell us what is urban health, what is public health, what is environmental health, and why should you and I care. Then once she's done, I will bring in just residential architecture, but I'll focus on public housing, just to look at that and what's important for we as architects to really think about urban health and how we can begin to match or maybe even overlap our profession with public health. Over to you, Martha, and thank you, colleagues, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So today, this is what I'm going to talk to you about. I want to talk about creating healthy and sustainable urban environments through integrated urban planning and design. And this is where you architects do come in. So this topic highlights the importance of considering public and environmental health in urban planning and designing processes. But what are the things that we need to focus on? In my presentation, I will give you an overview, like we'll talk about the understanding of urban health, understanding what is environmental health, and then how do we combine architecture, design, and public health, and then what is the architecture contribution, and then obviously look at what else has to be done, what else should we take into consideration. I know Eugene has introduced me, but I also want you to know that my name is Martha, and as Martha, I'm a lioness that is calm, loyal, and also commanding. I'm a mother of two, a boy and a girl, and I've noticed that their characters is like that of a zebra, playful but very observant, and you cannot miss it once you see it in the jungle. So because of my nature, of my background, and being a mother, I find that this is very critical for us to consider and look at. I'll give you a bit of a background of what are the things that you have to think about when we talk about urban health, public health, and environmental health. And then later on, I give an idea of what I think architects should take into consideration when designing and planning for the urban environments. So I'll start with urban health. Urban health refers to your physical, mental, social, and environmental well-being of people in urban areas. And when we consider that, we bring in the public health. Public health, in this realm, we are talking of the multidisciplinary field that focuses on protecting and improving the health of populations. And there are also a couple of categories that we will need to consider when we talk of public health and also urban health. I'll start with the urban health. There are these components that I will talk about actually have an interaction with each other, and they affect each other. And together, they will determine the overall health of urban populations. So it is critical for us to understand them. I'll start with the physical environment, the social environment, healthy behaviors, access to healthcare, public health policies and interventions, and then have an analysis of how these come together to have an impact on the urban health and the urban populations. In this regard, the physical environment that you must consider is the built environment where architecture come in, with the design of housing, with the design of the transportation system, with the infrastructure, and also the natural environment, environmental factors that have an impact on such housing, transportation, and infrastructure, such as your air quality, and green spaces. Not forgetting the climate. And then when we're talking about the social environments, we are looking at the social networks. What kind of social support is available? What kind of community engagement is there? And the social inequalities. And then when we talk of the health behaviors, we need to consider the action that impact the health outcomes. These are like the individual actions, such as your smoking, the physical activities, such as going to the gym, like I do, the diet, like the dietitians will recommend that 80% of what you are is what you eat. And then 20% is the physical activities of what you do, walking or going to the gym. And then the access to the healthcare, we are talking about the health facilities that are available, the services and the medical professionals. I don't even want to talk about the exodus of our health professionals to the greener pastures. And then we come to the public health policies and interventions, where we are looking at the programs that are designed to promote health and then prevent diseases in these urban populations. So overall, you will see that all these components have an impact on the determination of what urban health is all about. That's why we need to make sure that environmental practitioners, public health practitioners, and architects all put their heads together in the designing and in the planning of these urban environments. I've just given these images so that you can just see where we are at in different cities, and then you just think about, what do we do to make sure that we don't get to this point? Is there planning strategies that we need to incorporate or take into consideration so that we don't get into such scenarios? Then I come to the realm of what we need to really focus on. What is public health? In this instance, when I'm talking about public health, I want you to think about, I've given a mind map of all the things and all the components that we have to throw into the realm of public health for you to consider. We are talking about epidemiology, biostats, health promotion, health communication, health policies and management, social and behavioral sciences. You see that public health is actually multidisciplinary. It's a lot of things coming together, but all of them are coming together to focus on protecting and improving the health of populations. Not necessarily urban populations, but for us today, we're focusing on the urban environments. And all these aspects are put together and taken into consideration when we talk about environmental health. So when we talk about now environmental health, we have taken all the aspects that are taken into consideration by public health, and then all these factors are affecting the health, and then these environmental health factors will have an impact on your air, on water pollution, on hazardous waste, and ultimately all the time see that I'm not leaving out climate. And now we'll be considering climate change. And now environmental health specialists and public health specialists, I'm just grouping them together. They work to prevent and control these environmental hazards onto causing a disease and injury. And if this is not taken into consideration, I've just given you also images that are looking at your public urban health, where we've got high density of people living in areas, we've got scarcity of water, and I think now there's some areas in Johannesburg that were experiencing shortages of water. It's because of the infrastructure designs and planning that was not well done. Of course, I don't want to get political, but we know what is being explained. And then there is an image showing air pollution. I don't even want to go to ESCOM. And then we've got the water bodies that have been affected. So when we put all these components, we come to administer or manage them as environmental health practitioners. This is what we do. We take public health components, and then we take the urban health components and put them together, although into different classes. And the classes that I just wanted to highlight to you or to conscientize you on is, when we talk of public health, think of the air quality, think of the water quality, think of food safety, think of hazardous substances, vector control, radiation, and climate change. And then all these aspects, they are also in the urban health, when we consider urban health, they also affect the human health. And what we are looking at now is we must integrate the planning and the designing of the urban environment so that we have healthy urban environments. And when we are designing this, what should we put or what should we take into consideration? I will use practitioners such as the architect. There are several ways we can incorporate planning and designing into the public health to promote healthy communities. First, I'll talk about the designing of active transportation, such as walking and cycling areas. This can encourage physical activity and improve overall health. And architects can actually design buildings and communities that support such active transportation. And in their designing, they must include like a pedestrian-friendly streets and also a cycling-friendly streets, and design buildings with bike storages and shower facilities. I know this sounds like it's way out of our planning, but when I went to the Netherlands, I saw that this was actually feasible and this actually works, but it takes a lot of planning and designing to make it applicable. I see some of the tracks that have been designed in Johannesburg, like the cycle tracks, they lead nowhere, and there's nowhere where you can put your bicycle. So how do I bring my bicycle into the CBD? I can't, because the system does not allow that. We will not talk about the other cultures of having thieves around. I will not go into that. But of course, when things have been designed well, they can be used. Then I can also suggest that architects can design buildings and communities that support access to healthy foods. This can include designing buildings that have community gardens or rooftop farms, and locating buildings near grocery stores and farmers markets. This designing can be put together. I've seen that 4 ways, we've got a farmers market in 4 ways, and people actually love it because you get a fresh produce and you get a fresh food there. So when places like that are there, people are encouraged to go and get fresh food and live healthy living. And I can also say there can be designs of buildings that promote indoor air quality by incorporating ventilation systems and designing with materials that do not emit harmful chemicals, and designing buildings that maximize natural ventilation. I've seen buildings that have glass houses, and I find this to be very, very innovative because you don't need a lot of electricity in there. You've got natural lighting, And then there's lots of windows. You've got natural ventilation. I applaud those designers that have put that into consideration. And then I also encourage like the design of buildings and communities that create healthy environments, including incorporating green spaces, using materials that promote health. I know the people that design using recyclable materials. I applaud those. And then we can also design buildings that promote incorporating buildings that deter crime, because I know we've got a culture that allows or that leads us to having criminal activities. But if we have buildings that deter crime and communities that have safe routes, then that can actually encourage people to use such routes. And then finally, we can actually incorporate healthy communities that have people who live and work around the areas. So if there's design of places where there is a creche, there's a school, there's a shopping center in the same realm, like I'm thinking of the way a midstream was designed, though it is on the upper end stream, we can design something like that even with low earning, that have everything in one place. Then you can have such designs. But of course, this can be in the mind, but if you don't think of bigger things, you cannot achieve anything. I was so excited when we started to have the public transport system, the Ria Via, that works. I'm still very impressed by this, because you can only start to see a place that is well developed if people can use public transport. If people can still not use public transport, you know, there's a lot of things that still needs to be taken into consideration. I've spoken about the architectural contribution into the designing in my talk already. And these are some of the images that I thought would revamp your thinking, of course, which you've already been doing, but just to think about promoting access to healthy foods. If I have space to have a garden, then I am likely to use that space. But most of the buildings that are coming up now, there is not even a space for a flower, just one pot. So obviously that discourages a building. Having healthy gardens. What else should be taken into consideration? As environmental health practitioners, when we think of public health, we also think about zoning. And zoning is very important. I know someone was going to say this. I'm just going to preempt. I know that you will say, can we just put gardens everywhere? Can we do this? Can we do that? But if zoning is done in an urban setup, we can actually demarcate certain areas for residential, for commercial, for industrial, for recreational, and then our designs will be done to suit that kind of zoning that we have done. And then even the land use would be primarily for what is being designed for that zone. Especially in an urban setup, we cannot think of having a fields or a plot in a high density, because already we are trying to accommodate more people at a low cost. But if everything has been done well, our designing can be incorporated in such. And then the density of population in buildings should also be looked at, so that we don't have overpopulation in the areas. Even the transportation that I spoke about earlier, it must be done such that it can be coming from areas where we have higher density. And even those where we've got low density, we must have a public system that moves from those areas. And only zoning can make it feasible. And then the community can come in the zoning decisions. We can have public input and feedback that can provide valuable insights into what their expectations are in the different areas. And then finally, if the zoning is done well, some of the environmental impacts which we've been talking about, like air pollution, will be minimized, because the environmental impacts and zoning decisions that have been considered we will take away the minimize the pollution that can take place, and thus protect the natural resources, because the zoning would have been done in a good way. And then finally, you can also now look at the economic development goals of the communities, and then allocate space where people can also have recreational space. Even if it's in a high density, they also need parks where they can do even those. I've seen some of the parks have gym areas inside, so people can still go to the gym at a low cost. And this can only happen if the designing and the planning was done with such considerations that I'm talking about now. These are just images to show you that if these are not taken into consideration, we end up having areas where we've got decaying buildings that are not used because they're not conducive. Where they've been placed, no one would want to access. And then a good example of some of the places that have deteriorated over time, maybe because of the where they've been located, is that a Vodacom building that is close to our DFC. It's heartbreaking. If you go and look at the history of what has gone through, go and have a look at it, and then you'll see, and then see what we can do in future to avoid such occurrences, besides the other historical factors that can be there. As a lioness, I would like to thank you. And just to say at the end, as an academic, I feel that we collaborate with environmental health practitioners that are on the ground. And as architects who are designing and planning some of these aspects, I would say a continuous collaboration will lead to a healthier and sustainable and designing of livable urban environments. I thank you. And if you need to collaborate with me or give me information, you can have my details here. And I'm giving over to Dr. Jennifer to continue. Science and studies.
Thank you so much, Martha. And colleagues, we have had, we've now heard from Martha the public health and environmental health and what that means and what are the sub areas of this specialty. Now, for the next few slides, I'm going to just share what the majority of the South African goes through. So, for purposes of this presentation, we have decided to just list the different types. We're not going to talk about private sector and the other clients living in the suburb. No, we're going to talk about the high density residential. We're going to talk about a bit of the reconstruction and development, and then some images on rural housing. Just to argue, colleagues, this afternoon, that we really need more architects. We need architects to really get passionate about the whole field of urban health, overlapping architecture and public health. Because once we do that, colleagues, we are most likely going to have a better feedback in terms of the health of the majority of the South African, right? Next slide. So the first slide, next slide. The first image here is, it's a project. This is rural housing. Now, in the rural housing program, we don't have much problems there because obviously with the rural housing, the densities are low. It's about 40 dwelling units per hectare. It's low density, single units per plot and so on, right? Next slide. But then the argument then begins to come when the densities start rising. So if we look at another type of housing, the social housing, so the densities start rising per, so the numbers in terms of dwelling unit per hectare start going up. Next slide. But what then we begin to ask ourselves, and this is where the architect comes in, that when you get that tender or when you get that opportunity to design for state housing, how about we consider having the should I call it in lay terms, the post-user manual. For instance, this is a social housing project in KZN, very beautiful, beautifully built. The densities are working quite right. The urban health aspect looks like it's working for the right population, for the right densities. Next slide. But what begins to happen then when the densities go up, dwelling units per hectare, architects? Have we then started having the discussion on the implications on the health of the populations that later come into this housing? Because you as architects, you and I as architects, are actually have the power to guide the state to say, okay, fine, we have designed these particular houses at these densities within these areas. However, should these densities go above a certain threshold, we are running a risk of compromising the health of the residents, because the World Health Organization is correctly telling us that urbanization is linked to the high rates of depression, anxiety, mental ill health of people who live within this housing. So the purpose of today is to really cry out to colleagues, the architects, that can we take a step further? On top of the designs, can we also take a step further and advise in terms of post-user? 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when the densities have really gone up, what are we saying about the urban health of the populations that enter this housing? Next slide. So if we look at another project, again, the Joe Community Residential Project, next slide. Again, we see that depending on the program, this is a community residential unit, that densities really get higher and higher. Now, next project. So what we are arguing today is that well and good, as architects, you have designed this housing, you have made your contribution. But today we are saying it's not enough. We need you to step up and say, and advise, and say, beyond a certain density, this public state housing is going to compromise the health of the people living in. We need that voice to come from the architects, nowhere else. Next. If we look at another, maybe the IRDP, Integrated Residential Development Program, you see when the projects are new, it makes sense, right? If you look at the Bloom Park Housing Development Project, it makes sense. 41 dwelling units per hectare, densities seem quite right, open spaces, correctly placed. But what happens, colleagues, 10 years from now when the population has doubled? We need architects to begin talking about the post-user 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 15 years from now. How about the urban health of the populations that are coming here? That is a voice that is missing today. Next slide. For instance, we obviously see this in the inner city housing, like this is obviously abandoned inner city, now running as a very high gang occupied housing within inner cities. I'm not blaming any architect, but I'm saying I am persuaded that the power lies within the architectural profession to begin to speak up and speak loud about the risks within residential housing in the inner city. The World Health Organization is convincing us that infectious diseases, tuberculosis, diarrhea, they thrive within poor and overcrowded environments such as this, and this is related to unhealthy, poor sanitation, waste management. We, as the South African Institute of Architects, SAICAP, regional offices, we have the power to begin to raise our voices. Even if it will not be implemented, we have the platforms to raise our voices and say something about the health within residential housing, especially within inner cities, especially within overcrowded areas. Next slide. Informal settlements are no exemption. The World Health Organization, Department of Health, and many more statistics bodies are still telling us that non-communicable diseases like heart disease, asthma, cancer, diabetes are made worse when it is unhealthy living conditions, inadequate green spaces, pollution, noise, water, and soil contamination. So the purpose of our presentation today with Martha is to drive it home that we need architects to begin to talk about this part as well. We have seen the buildings, we have seen the designs, we've seen the proposals, we have seen the beautiful, beautiful proposals built. But today we are saying we need another voice that goes beyond the design beyond the users? What happens when the population has doubled within those specific housing units? In conclusion, the purpose of today was to come before the architectural profession and say, urban health, the discussion of urban health needs you too. We need to see more architectural profession positions on the public health policy. We need to see more architects standing up to talk about the transportation policy, because architects are the ones designing some of these pieces that put the parts together in cities, right? As the famous philosopher said, how do you sleep at night when we see all of this happening within our communities? Thank you so much. That's it for myself and Martha. Over to you, Eugene.
Thank you so much, Martha and Jennifer. You have actually made a passionate plea to all of those who are attending this this event. In fact, you have nearly managed to turn me into a politician, but no, thank you so much. Look, we've got some very interesting comments that have come through, but regrettably, time is not going to permit us to attend to each of these comments. But I want to thank you, attendees, for the comments that you have sent through, and I'm sure that this debate needs to be taken forward so that the voice of architects can be added to the voice of Jennifer and Martha, and a better environment must be created if I look at some of the slides that you presented. But once again, thank you. Colleagues, then it's my great privilege to introduce you to our next presenters. You see them on the screen. We're going to go straight into introducing you to Jacobus and Jessica. Jacobus studied at the University of the Witwatersrand. He is an enthusiastic architect focusing on luxury lodge spaces in Africa. And I'm sure his passion and enthusiasm will also come through. He's a passionate life learner who loves sharing his knowledge as much as he can. And hence Jacobus has agreed to present this afternoon. He's obsessive about learning how to run the studio effectively and efficiently, constantly finding better and newer ways of managing the team, managing projects, and managing his business. He loves drawing and spends at least 30 minutes every day getting better at this wonderful creative expression. Jessica Rogers also studied at the University of the Witwatersrand. She is a hands-on architect with a love for the unknown. Constant curiosity drives her to explore and make through welding, silversmithing, woodwork, and pottery. She is also passionate and is open-minded about conceptualization, technical resolution through sharing and receiving knowledge with others is also critical in her practice. This afternoon, Jacobus and Jess will share with us lessons from the depth of the Koppie designing an off-grid luxury lodge. We look forward to your presentation. Jacobus and Jess, over to you.
Okay. So just to kind of, I don't know where you lost me. So just kind of us as a team, we believe in the power of free-flowing exploration and play, whether this be in drawing, making, and perhaps even dreaming.
Well said. From my side, just a little added a thing. This is just a picture of a sweaty architect on site, just to show that we do get our hands dirty, even if it's just walking around. and the obsession is definitely there to around drawing, but then also to entrench that obsession into my team. They do give me resistance, but I do my best. We're going to start off by doing a free association exercise. And what this basically is, I'm going to show you a series of 3 images. And you're just going to, in the text box or the questions box, going to write the first thing that comes to your mind, the first 3 words that come to your mind when we do them. I'm just going to give you an example. So, for example, there's an image of birds. So I could think of flying or wind or freedom. Those would be 3 words that I associate with that image. So the next 3 images, you're just going to write into the questions what you think or see when you write them down. Try and think rather about what you feel. And then Jess will read them out after you've done that. So first image, this is it. Just write down in the comments and the questions what you think or what you feel when you see that image. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We've got to move quite quickly, so hopefully.
Okay, Jessica is having issues, so I've got organized chaos, traffic, I'm going to be late for my meeting, congestion, traffic, confinement, rush hour, frustration.
Love it. Okay, you guys nailed it. Fantastic. The presentation's working. Number 2, what do you see? What do you feel or what do you experience when you see that?
Sadness, mess, a really bad day, oops, disappointment, oops again, lots of sadness, lots of aish, bliksem, waste, sweat, oh dear, no money gone, oops, aish again.
Oh gosh, okay, a lot of aishes, I love it. Aish and aish, fantastic, aish cream. Okay, one more, let's do it. I think you're back, Jess.
I'm back.
All right.
I've got fear, disappointment, OMG, South Africa, vandalism, frustration, crime, robbery, affronted, money. My laptop is gone. Welcome to SA, thieves, invasion, fear.
Okay, we got it. That's good.
Pretty much.
Let's just pause on that one. Okay, so as you'll notice, we went from traffic to ice cream to invasion of privacy. This is what happens when you are confronted with a reality. You're confronted with something that has gone wrong. Now, we all have the choice to how we're going to react to that. So what I want you to do is we're going to do this exercise again, but this time I want you to flip it. You're going to take that image and I want you to write positives of what you think or what you experience when you see this image. We're going to start this whole process again. So starting off with the easiest one. Let's go. Give me your positive experience, positive feeling that you get when you see this image. The opportunity, if you will.
Opportunity, going home, free, business, growing economy, getting there, organized, hustle and bustle, thriving, travel. Yay, catch up with messages.
Yes,
weekend.
Great. Weekend.
Electricity.
There's power.
Employed. Business growth.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like for me, when I see traffic, I think podcasting. I get to listen to some podcasts or some books. There's an opportunity here. You got idle time. All right, let's do the next slide.
Okay, so I'll have another more for me. Holiday, yummy.
Yeah.
Summer day, starting a new diet.
Exactly. Save myself those
different
calories.
flavor. 5-second rule.
Cool, yeah.
Warmth.
That's pretty gross. Yeah.
Good
Summer
weather.
days, good vibes. Fantastic.
Swim.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
You're at the beach. All right, now the last one.
New car. It's not my car. Accident. Found my keys. New window. Security. Opportunity. Recovery. Air. Ventilation.
Yeah.
Breezy.
Free ventilation. Exactly.
Yeah, easy entry. Got into the car.
It wasn't your car though. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right, so here you can see that it's all about your framework. It's your internal filter that determines what's actually happening. So going into the actual presentation, lessons from the depth of a copy. Change your mind, change everything. All right.
So our site sits in Limpopo. This is a drone shot of the copy that it sits on. And you can see that we've got a little arrow to the exact location and just a north to give you some context there. The site is pretty hot in summer. It reaches highs of 30s. And in winter, it reaches very low temperatures, less than 10 degrees. So we are dealing with quite a variance, we're dealing with a variance of temperature, with our view being to the west. Most of our strong prevailing winds come from the north and northeast, and so we decided to bury it.
But Jess, when you bury it, what are you going to do with all that junk? Because if you bury a building, you've got to take out all that soil, and now what do you do with it? And this is the thing: is that seeing an opportunity in a negative, something that you might have created, but it's still an opportunity. So like, okay, why don't we ram that soil that we're removing? And that's what we decided to do. So all the soil we took out, we did samples with, and then realized that the soil isn't really appropriate for ramming. But we did a water hole that was appropriate for ramming, so we used that soil instead. Just quickly going to run through all the challenges that we faced while we were working on the site. Number one was the topography. It's inherently difficult working on a koppie, on a hill. Maneuverability is challenging, access is challenging. There's a slope, there's lots of things that you have to move around and navigate. In order to build dig this big hole, you need big machines, and they need to get to sites, and that's difficult because the roads aren't great. The transportation isn't easy. You have a limitation on the kind of equipment that you can bring to site because of the roads only being able to transport a certain load. And of course, those machines make noise, constant noise. So much so that neighbors complain, even though they're 2 kilometers away, they complain about the noise that our machines make. And then when you're digging into a hole, there's the unforeseen. You don't know what's going to come out of this hole. You don't know what you're going to find. And in this instance, this was this massive boulder that we just couldn't move. You can't break it. You can't pull it out. You have to work with it. So you have to take all these things that happen and you have to adapt and change and reconfigure what you thought has to be done.
So with all of these challenges, it also means that our services are affected. We have sewerage, we have water supply, our pathways, our fire is actually all decided on site because we come across, all these things that come up that we have to divert around. We have these accessible pathways that allow us to service everything. So we try and keep everything in our pathways so that it's accessible at least. In these remote locations as well, there's generally quite an issue with water supply. We couldn't find water on sites. There was 8 boreholes that were dug before we found water. The distance from that borehole to our site is also an issue, so we have to run long lines. There's intermittent power and breakages that happen all the time. We constantly have elephants that are screwing with the borehole line. And yeah, we have to deal with those issues all the time. So one of the really great features about this reserve is it's applying for a dark sky status. So within certain areas, no nighttime light pollution is around. And this is just, really to enjoy the full impact of nature. But because it's so dark, any light that you do have is emphasized. So this picture that you see here is taken from another lodge with one of those little handheld load shedding torches. and that light source is 9 kilometers away. So all light needs to be treated carefully, and the intensity has to be considered.
And on top of that, we're working in a reserve. So that means there's protected fauna, there's protected insects, there's protected animals, and our environmental officer is actually on this call, and they're protected trees. And this is super interesting because, you know, when the trees are protected, you know, you'll come and you'll do like a survey, and the tree surveyor will come and he will say, okay, all these trees are marked out there, all the ones that are protected. Then your land surveyor will come out and measure all those trees and go, cool, you've got all the protected trees. And then you come to site and you start setting out. And then all of a sudden, you know, your environmental officer will be like, oh, here's this little shrub. It's maybe 1/2 meter tall. That's a protected tree. And then you're faced with this decision. Do you now apply to have that little tree removed? Is that in the ethos and the brand of what you're trying to build? Or do you go, you know what, I'm actually going to redesign this building. I'm going to design so that we can protect and ensure that the whole purpose of what we're trying to do remains intact. And then lastly, it's in a remote location. Just so you know, this is not the actual site. You know, so everything is difficult to get to. It's hard to get equipment there. It's hard to get your services there. Site visits are always a challenge. Any adjustments you make is a difficulty. You know, to get samples to site, to even, you know, get the whole team to site. All of these things are logistical and kind of very frustrating to work with. But all of that, again, is about changing your mindset, going, this is an opportunity to work in such remote and beautiful locations.
So in terms of design, there was a lot of playfulness involved with curbs. But the nice thing about curbs is that they're quite versatile to be able to move once we're on site. All of these site constraints that came about, we had to kind of adjust and move around and curve around to be able to accommodate the environment. So our kind of main lodge, this is just a drone shot of the spas. We're building it now. Our kind of main, just moving on to the site plan. There's a there's a tiered main lodge, and you can see there's the kind of 3 main tiers of the lodge that's buried into the mountain and integrated into the contours. Back of house is on the southern side of the kopje, so kind of hidden away from the main lodge. There are a few inaccessible buildings as well that we had to deal with a different construction due to heavy machinery not being able to get up there and move any rocks. We have 2 very experiential curved buildings, the reception and the spa. All of our pathways and access was very site dependent, so a lot of this has changed based on how the construction has been going, how we've been able to move earth, and what trees we had to go around, and kind of moving around all these site challenges as well. So here you can get a good idea of how the actual lodge is tiered. So the main purpose of this is also so all the suites have views into the bush. So like kind of these sweeping views into the bush. There's a public tier below, standard suites in the middle tier, and then kind of a penthouse tier at the top. This just gives you another view into tiered buildings. So these are, you know, to kind of deal with this cut and fill of the mountain, we've got these intense retaining walls to hold back all the soil. So to deal with stormwater issues and you know, avoid any suites on the retaining wall, we have pathways at the back. A lot of our services run within that. It's also to allow all our suites to have these like sweeping views of the front. So circulation kind of happens at the back and in the middle of the tiers. This is our bottom tier. And this is where our major like public space happens. So there's a strong axial design. We're playing with the idea of being buried and exposed to the promenade of the building. So you kind of access through the back of the building, into walkways in the back, which, you know, is kind of enclosed and cave-like, and then walking into the main building and you are opened up again. So there's kind of this contrast that is emphasized as you walk through the building. So we had to deal with privacy as well. A lot of the suites, you know, we had to expose as much of them to the views, as that's, you know, that's pretty much why guests are there. They're here for this, you know, this intense connection with nature. But this also comes with a privacy issue. So luckily our tiers deal with a portion of this as they're staggered downwards, but there's still screening that has to take place, especially with outdoor showers and everything that we have. At some point we had sky beds on top of the roof, so you could kind of sit in, you know, lie in beds on top of the roof and watch the stars. But unfortunately that, you know, we had an issue with privacy and with views. They were actually obscuring views there. So what we decided to do is make the suites the sky bed. So essentially we cut through a skylight, and your bed inside becomes your stargazing bed. This also, it dealt with privacy, and it dealt with you know, the sweeping views that we wanted. But of course, with the skylights, we came across a number of other issues in terms of waterproofing, in terms of how we screen this thing. They have to be fully clear so that you can see the stars. So we have to shade them. We have to have this like automated shader so that we can avoid the room cooking, and we can avoid you know, any kind of damage to furniture as well.
And then lastly, you're kind of dealing with the setting out issue, right? So you come to site and you get a surveyor in, and he kind of surveys the whole site and goes, okay, these are the contours, these are the trees, there's all this information that you got. And then you start, you know, designing a building, do your whole building. And when you start coming to site to actually start building this thing, you realize, wait a minute, this isn't really working so well. The trees aren't in the right place, the contours aren't in the right place. There's, like I said earlier, there's protected trees that are missed. So you get another survey out, and then he does his thing, and same thing happens. And eventually you stop using this because it doesn't work. So you start going, okay, I need to pull a line, and this is where the line's going to be. And you start going, okay, how do we set out these ridiculously long wide curves? How do you set out on a site that you don't have, you know, there's no clear sight, there's trees that you need to protect, that you have to move around, that you don't know necessarily where the cut and fill is going to be, you don't necessarily, there's so many unknowns, you don't know where there's going to be boulders that you're trying to dig out. So all of this means that you're constantly working with this unknown, this very, very big black swan kind of concept. Luckily, we had an amazing contractor who was able to very, you know, methodically deal with this ridiculous struggle. And we had to simplify and bring that whole process down to a very basic way of doing it. And then, of course, it's an off-grid lodge. There's no power. So we had to provide and bring all those systems into place. This is an example of another lodge I did for the same client, where we had the solar walkway. And so we turned that idea of having a walkway and solar system, and we go, okay, how do we take that and make it something and celebrate it, make it something interesting, add it to the design instead of just hiding and pretending, oh, it's in a solar farm somewhere, you know, away from site. We try and screen it as much as possible. Let's celebrate it. Let's show to guests that come that this is what this lodge is about. This is what off power actually means.
So interestingly enough, you know, in this particular site, heat was not our major issue to deal with in terms of energy. We actually had to deal with cold. So there's a real issue of heat escaping the units, and we had to kind of combat this in a number of ways. I can just move on from that.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
So you can see here is kind of a, you know, it's like a heat entering the building diagram. So this, you know, with this beautiful curve and this large sweeping kind of views, it also brought an issue into some units being heated a lot more than others. So we had to kind of deal with them in what really helps us to deal with them in an automated kind of way. So our cooling system, our AC essentially is dealt with fan coils, our underfloor heating and cooling, and our water heating is all done through a combined system. So we've successfully dealt with heating in an innovative and unconventional way. This is all automated as well, so that it can efficiently cool and heat the space without too much guest interaction going into it. It allows us to effectively manage and control these fluctuations. We also have a series of screens on the windows and the skylights that are automated to allow us to control our temperature, so no overheating or overcooling takes place. So this is a comfortable environment.
So this is just to say, to finish off by saying, okay, firstly, this is the two of us, but to leave you with this idea that if you face every problem that you have, every obstacle that you have with this, defeatist mindset, oh my gosh, this has changed, or the client has requested a last minute adjustment, or the tree is completely in the wrong place, the survey didn't get it properly, or we dug up this big hole, there's this massive rock that we can't move. If you come with an immovable mindset, it means that you're always going to be struggling to work with this realm of architecture, with this realm of being a human. And so what I implore from you and ask you to do is, one message, one takeaway is change your mind, and you can change everything. Your approach is the determining factor, not everything around you. It's an internal journey. It's not an external journey. That will determine whether or not you can make the strides that you need to make. Thank you very much for staying with us for this time. If there are any questions, I think we've got some time still. Karina will probably advise us if there's anything that we need to answer.
I can see the questions and we can answer a few of them.
Cool.
Yes, well,
So,
Jacobus and Jess, thank you. Yes, let's take the questions. Yes, the first one that came was Glenn Murcutt would be crying. So that's
Glenn
just a
Murcutt would be
comment
crying.
from Samantha touched lightly. So
yeah, we're not touching the ground lightly. This is the anti-Glenn Murcutt design.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, question: ventilation in the kitchen. Ileani Ligi. I don't know. It was one of the earlier slides. Did you have any problems with ventilation in the kitchen?
we have full ventilation in the kitchen. It, luckily is ventilated into our passage spaces, into our, courtyard spaces, and efficiently dealt with on a back of the house side.
Okay. Right. Kathleen Weston wants to know, wouldn't it be nicer to have the shower on the facade?
Yes, so we did initially have our showers at the front. It was a client request that we have them at the back. So what we did to tackle that was to have two showers. We have an inside shower and we have an outdoor shower on each suite as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so the concept there was because if you have both showers, indoor and outdoor, having a view, then the loo, your cubicle, won't have anything. It'll just always look into a wall. So by flipping them, at least you have that variety.
Loo with the view is great.
Yeah.
Okay, Natalie van Sale says, how did you deal with the skylight in terms of sleeping? Many people like sleeping in, I presume, in the mornings.
Yes, so
sorry,
we actually have
no going. You have to wake up. Those are the rules.
Get up.
You go to game drive. The time is up. The sun is up. It's time to go look at some animals.
Nature's way. No,
Yeah.
we actually do have two screens. One is a blockout screen that is controlled by the guest, and another one is a shader screen that is automated to allow heat to not come in the day and to open up at night to have views to the stars.
Okay. Then Natalie, same Natalie, who assisted with energy calculations and specifications? Any comment on that?
A company called Solid Green.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay.
It has
Charles.
green in the name, right? It always has to have green in the name.
Charles, thank you for your compliment. Beautiful presentation. And then Steve, wonderful and extremely varied mindset to have. Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks, Steve. Pernille, wonderful presentation. Thank you. Diedrich Lubber, thank you. Enjoyed it. And then June Connolly.
I think you said love it, not live it. I love it too, man.
Why
Sorry,
not use passive techniques when designing the building, like cavity walls, specifically when on the side that is the coldest? June, any response to that?
So passive systems were very much initially kind of implemented, and we had kind of put those systems in place. But there were criteria that were required from the client that mitigated or prevented us from actually fully implementing them. And so we opted, instead of using a mechanized electronic system, and because we're off grid, we basically said, okay, well, that just means the expense is going to be high. You're going to have to spend more on kind of putting a solar system in place to kind of cool the building. But initially, that was very much a kind of a push that we had, was to kind of do as much passive as possible. The problem also with going passive is that it requires a lot more operational usage. You know, you have to have your team that then open and close the building necessarily, or, you know, opening and closing blinds or windows, that kind of thing. So there has to be more hands-on from an operational point of view. And there's a limit to the amount of people they can have on site. So that already kind of forced us to kind of go, okay, we actually can't provide the service and the guest experience that we want if we go for a fully passive system.
Okay, great. Deborah, thank you. Love your mindset and outlook, most definitely.
Thank you very much.
Luigi says, how do you deal with water supply and sewerage?
Do you want to talk to that,
so
Jess, or should I?
Yeah, so we have our, I think I did mention that we have pathways at the back that we keep all our services in, and that essentially gets, you know, it's all paved as well, so we can lift and service and kind of close as much as we need. So it's a very like open system, and then it just exits out the building at one point.
And then also we have a fully a full water treatment plant that deals with all the water and then turns that into potable water that can, well, not potable, but irrigate. You can irrigate with it, and then we're using that to irrigate all those roof gardens and any kind of planting around the actual lodge itself. Okay,
great. Then Jacques de Villiers says, just seeing such luxury in contrast to the previous presentation and the reality of most South Africans makes me feel quite guilty. So we'll leave that one. It's very relevant, but
it's a good point. It's a good point.
Yeah. Iliani, once again, great. Charles, how did you deal with drainage on the site? I think you've touched on that, so we'll move on. How did they incorporate SANS XA and building standards in the design and execution on site? Dirk Lourens wants to know that.
I mean, well, the SANS XA, we had a green consultant that helped us, advised us to make sure that we comply. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then how are the planted roofs surviving? I don't know whether it's too early to judge that. Jacobus?
We'll let you know. We're not there yet.
Okay, right.
Hopefully do.
By a hope and a prayer,
Okay. Okay, sunrise and sunset, did you take that into consideration whilst being in the unit? Units are north facing generally, hey?
West facing.
Are they west facing? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so you have a full sunset experience every day.
Okay. Right, Krista, thank you for your compliment. Sensational design. Tapisu, did you have issues with the building materials versus the environment?
I'd have
I
to,
think you tried.
yeah.
Okay,
I mean, you have
colleagues,
to kind of elaborate that question a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, unfortunately, we do have a time constraint, but thank you very much for all the questions, and sorry about the ones we're not able to answer, but I do trust that that the presentation has been stimulating, judging by the comments it has. So, Jacobus and Jess, thank you very much again.
Feel free to, sorry, Eugene, I thank you very much. But I just want to say, if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us on Instagram. If you also like any of the stuff that we do, you're welcome to follow us. We'd really appreciate that. And we always upload some great content. Sorry, Eugene, back to you.
Oh, great. Okay, no, colleagues, thank you very much. So that brings us really to the end of SAIAshare number 22. Thank you once again to Jennifer and Martha for alerting us to the importance of public health and the environment, and to Jacobus and Jess for sharing their passion with us. We trust
Thank you very much, Eugene.
Enjoyed the afternoon with us.
Thanks a lot.
SAIAshare carries a category 1 CPD value of 0.1, as Corina has already pointed out, and you will receive your email from SAIA within 3 weeks to be able to download your CPD certificate. Right, then we invite you to join us again on the first Friday of May. That's the 5th of May. We will again have 2 very interesting presentations for you. I am sure that you will enjoy them very much. Graham Wilson is the director of Osmond Lang Architects, and he will be sharing his experience and knowledge about mixed use developments with us. And then Nadine Engelbrecht is in private practice, an architect. She is a multiple award-winning architect from Pretoria. She will be speaking on architecture without fear. Right, colleagues, I leave you with this final thought for the day. I was reminded this past week of an ancient Greek proverb. A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit. The human nature is bent on expecting rewards for everything we do, but let us live our lives to the benefit of others. Let us rather plant trees that will bear fruit for those who come after us, even if we never have the benefit of eating of the fruit of our labor, or sitting in the shade of those trees we've planted. Continue to plant trees, literally and proverbially, figuratively. To all our Muslim attendees, we wish you all the best for Ramadan, and to our Christian attendees who are about to celebrate Easter, we wish you a joyous Easter. So thank you once again for joining, and do have a pleasant weekend. Bye-bye.